Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I am your host, Preston Jacobs, and I am joined here once again by the Alex Jones of the Game of Thrones community, Carmine, Red Team Review.
There is a slave child colony on Mars. Don't let them fool you. The media is always trying to fool you. But Preston, that was pretty good. That was pretty good, man. Next time I'll have you do the whole thing. But guys, welcome back to the Game of Thrones podcast. For those of you who are new here, we like to do an after show after every release to focus on comments and questions you guys left for us during the last episode. So don't forget to leave your thoughts down in the comments section, or feel free to message me, Carmine, on Twitter or Facebook, and we may discuss your thoughts in the next episode. And as always, we're available on SoundCloud and iTunes, so be sure to check us out there. And also, before we begin, I just want to give a big shout out to Quake for sponsoring today's podcast. For those of you who don't know, they're a new app that allows you to collect stickers, cards, and toys for free from some of your favorite shows on television, such as Rick and Morty, Breaking Bad, and yes, even Game of Thrones. So if you're like me and you enjoy using emojis and stickers, then Quake has thousands of them. There's nothing like adding a Tyrion Lannister sticker at the end of every text message to make you feel like a certified badass or maybe an alcoholic. It's available for free on Android and iPhone, and my username on there is Red Team Review, so feel free to add me on there and trade with me. Links are below in the description. So, before we begin, I just want to say happy late birthday to Preston. For those of you who don't know, it was Preston's birthday a couple weeks ago, and he finally turned 21, so congratulations.
21. It was incredible. 21 shots. Yeah, finally.
You actually posted a pretty somber post on Facebook. What about you looking in the mirror? What was up with that?
Well, I mean, I don't like birthdays. Who does like birthdays? I mean, you know, it's a reminder of dying. But I mean, this is why you have your friends around, and why people get wasted on their birthday is, you know, constant reminder that we're gonna blink out of existence. You know.
Well,
good times. Well,
I will say this: like, you're still a young guy, but here's how I do aging, right? See, right now I'm 25. When you're 45, I'll be 30. When you're 50, I'll be 30. And then when you're 55, you'll understand why I'm still 25. So that is my whole life pro-life tip on aging.
I also look at it as years until death. So sometimes people will tease me and they'll be like, "Oh man, you're so old," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're probably gonna die first, person I'm talking to." You know,
what the fuck?
I'm pretty healthy. You know, so sometimes I turn it around like that. Like, man, you yourself, sir, only have 30 years left.
Jesus Christ. You have a nice office job. There's no way you could die in there. I mean, versus someone who has to go out all the time.
Well, yeah, you know.
Who's working in construction? Or...
I've got incredibly low cholesterol. Though tall people tend to die early, so maybe I don't know.
Well, Preston has our questions for this episode, so I'm gonna be letting you take the helm on this one in terms of questions, and we're gonna be discussing the second trailer a little bit because you haven't done your own Q&A yet, which is fine. We can just do it here if you want. So go ahead.
Yeah. I was getting some questions about, and I mostly get questions like thrown through my window, like wrapped around bricks. So I wanted to ask you about Lightbringer. And so I've been getting a lot of questions about what happened to Stannis' sword, and if it somehow got picked up and is now in Beric Dondarrion's hands, because the new one, Beric Dondarrion doesn't look like he's lighting his sword, and so some people think that maybe that's Stannis' sword, Lightbringer.
Well, my whole theory on the whole Lightbringer thing in the show, not the books, is that when Stannis took out his flaming sword thing in season 2, episode 1 of season 2, it wasn't really a flaming sword because he's cool and he's badass and the sword is special. It was probably Melisandre doing her own tricks, because in season 4, when Melisandre's taking a bath and Stannis' wife comes in, she basically, confesses that a lot of her quote-unquote magic are just parlor tricks. They're just, bullshit. So I think that's what Melisandre was doing to make Stannis I think that's what Melisandre was doing to convince Stannis that the whole flaming sword thing means he's the chosen one. But what I really think the whole thing is that either Beric is the chosen one, either Beric is Azor Ahai, or that Thoros of Myr brought Lightbringer, the actual Lightbringer, with him from Ashai when he came to Westeros ages ago. He brought it with him. He used it in the Greyjoy Rebellion, which is why everyone's like, oh, that's Thoros of Myr. He was the flaming sword guy in the Greyjoy Rebellion. And he eventually gives it to Beric because they're best friends. To me, that would make more sense.
So it gets really confused, because obviously in the show, Stannis has a ceremony for Lightbringer on the beach, and he pulls out the flaming sword, and then we never see that goddamn sword ever again.
That's not true. We saw it when he was about to get his ass kicked, when the Bolton's men charge him, and we see it again when he's killing those two guys, showing that he's a competent fighter, but not competent enough to escape Brienne. But
it's not a flaming light sword. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not special.
So why didn't he use the flaming light sword when he was fighting in the Bolton battle?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not Lightbringer in the book sense. Like, it's not a big glowing sword that he pulls out and blinds everybody. Like, he has the ceremony on the beach for Lightbringer, and then it's no longer a special sword.
Wait, so are you saying Lightbringer is just a normal sword that's supposed to be special that only the Lord of Light chosen guy can use? It's just a normal sword that doesn't flame? Or does Lightbringer have to flame all the time for it to be that special chosen sword?
Well, I don't think so. Originally, I was wondering if it were actually Lightbringer, like could another dude pick up Lightbringer and have it be light, or can only Stannis do that? But in the show, it's not even light. Like, Stannis' sword doesn't even light up. So, like, Lightbringer's not a thing in the show. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just not a thing.
Just like the Valonqar thing.
Right, the Valonqar thing is not a thing. Mm-hmm. It's just he's got the ceremony, and then Lightbringer's never mentioned again. Now, Beric has a flaming sword, and in the book, he has to light the thing on fire because it's covered in wildfire, but in the show, his sword just lights up.
Right.
So, it's kind of like in the show, Beric has Lightbringer, but because it's a sword that automatically, like, flames up, while Stannis does not have Lightbringer. But so things are getting very confused. But yeah,
I mean, like I said, if Lightbringer is going to be in the show, I would rather Thoros of Myr have used it, given it to Beric, and that's why it can light up without him having to dip it in wildfire.
Right, because in the show, wildfire is a little rarer than
in the show, wildfire. Because in the show, wildfire is taboo. Not a lot of people know about it. Only the certain few people in King's Landing know about it, because there's probably jars of it was confiscated after the Mad King tried to have everything burned down. So,
I mean, apparently in the book, anyone can just go to the pyromancers and say, "Hey, can I have some wildfire?" And they'll go, "Sure, here you go."
Doesn't Jaime supposedly kill all of them, or kill a good chunk of them?
No, he only kills the head of the pyromancers, like, back in the day. Like, the pyromancer guild, like, survives. And Thoros shops with him. He goes in. He's like, "Here's $5. Give me some wildfire." and then then Cersei gets interested in him.
You were saying how it would be fucking weird if Stannis did have Lightbringer in the show, and then after he dies, his sword is just there, and all the workers from Winterfell come out to take the armor from the dead bodies, and some asshole just picks up the fucking sword and it flames.
Blinds himself. That's it, in the armory. And then maybe when they're headed north, like, Beric, like, finds it, but and that's why he has it. But no, I think Beric always seemed to have, in the show, Beric always just seemed to be able to light up his sword. And I don't know if he has a special sword. It's not explained. Unlike in the book where it's wildfire.
I would just like it if he had a special sword, because he's to me the reason he can either light that shit up without having to try is because one of two things in the show. He's either such a devoted warrior of the Lord of Light, like we've seen priests of the Lord of Light, we've seen priests and priestesses, we've seen devout followers who are just praying, but we've never seen a full-fledged warrior of the Lord of Light. Like how in the Faith of the Seven we've seen the Septas and Septons, and we've seen like actual warriors of them. We've never seen a warrior of the Lord of Light. So maybe it's a special ability only the certain warriors of the Lord of Light can activate.
You just never saw Kinvara like kicking the ass.
Exactly. We never like the one thing that always annoyed me is how is how I don't remember if this is in the books because this is Clash of Kings. The one thing that's always annoying about season 2 is how Davos says to Stannis, "Look, we're gonna go into the Battle of Blackwater. Don't bring her with you. Don't bring her with you." And Stannis is like, "All right, fine, I won't bring her with me." And then after the battle, after he loses, she goes, "If you brought me with you, I could have turned the tide of battle." I just always wanted to know how if she could have turned the tide of battle if she was there. How? How could she have done that? How could she have turned... Is there a moment like that in the books where... I don't remember Clash of Kings, but is there a moment after, like, Stannis loses? Is there a moment where she goes, "If I was there, I could have turned it"? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Because she has a chance to turn the tide in Season 5 when Stannis is about to get his ass kicked, but she runs away. So, how could she really turn the tide during the Battle of the Blackwater if she was there? Is that just bullshit?
Huh.
Because
so I will say, and I've been recently having some discussions with people over Melisandre. So when you're reading the second and third book, and Melisandre seems to have a lot more power, and is so much more mystical, and then that gets shattered in A Dance with Dragons when you have her chapter where she essentially reveals, actually, I'm a big fucking fraud. And so it's funny because when it's just, and this gets into my whole thing about why I don't think there's magic in Ice and Fire, or if there is, it operates by very, specific rules. Melisandre, like, a lot of people, like, when you're reading A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, you just assume she's magic. And so you're never looking for rules. So you're like, oh, she could turn the tide of battle through magic. She can birth shadow babies through magic. So when you say, like, oh, how can she do it? Well, magic. But once you read the Melisandre chapter and you realize she's mostly a fraud, it's like, well, no, she couldn't have turned the tide of battle at all. She's full of crap. She doesn't have that power.
Well, like you said, if it's magic, you don't like high fantasy where someone can just snap their fingers and like a fireball appears. You don't like that. And I understand. Right. This is not high fantasy. This is like a little dark fantasy. And with dark fantasy, a lot of the magic is grounded. For example, in a lot of fantasy novels and manga and comics I've read and shows I've seen, certain people can just snap their finger or wave their wand and a shadow assassin will appear. But in Game of Thrones, the magic is there, but it's more grounded. In order to make an assassin made of shadows appear, you have to maybe drink...
Hi, I'm Mr. Meeseeks!
Mr. Meeseeks. You have to maybe drink something, fuck a guy, and then birth it like you would a normal child. And instead of it being a child, it's just a deformed, crazy shadow monster that goes and... Mr. Meeseeks, basically, and goes and does your bidding.
Which is why I don't believe in shadow babies. But that's a whole nother discussion.
The whole Mr. Meeseeks. Preston and I were joking about how Melisandre's shadow babies are basically Mr. Meeseeks.
That's what people believe they are, yeah.
They have one purpose, and
they have one purpose.
Like, what were I saying?
They just know instantly, like,
yeah.
Birth it out. Hi, I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Kill Courtney Penrose. Okay. And then they disappear.
I would. What was I saying? Like, I would love it if the shadow baby was spawned to go kill Renly, but then Renly sees it beforehand and runs off and has to go chase him.
Then he has to create his own, and then they get super depressed. Why won't Renly stay in the same place? I hate my life.
Well, wait. Can shadow babies travel? Can these shadow... I like calling them shadow assassins. That makes it cooler. Can these shadow assassins travel long distances?
So now we're gonna get into it. This is we want to talk about shadow babies. I'll talk about shadow babies because I don't think they exist. Okay, so shadow babies. So you've got the Renly situation and you have the Courtney Penrose situation, and these are combined in the show, but they're two distinct events in the book.
Basically, for those of you who don't know, who haven't read the books, Courtney Penrose is he's the Castellan, right, of Storm's End?
Yeah, Castellan of Storm's End.
So Stannis has Melisandre use two shadow assassins, right? One against Renly, who is out in camp. He's camping with his soldiers, and afterwards, Stannis wants to take Storm's End, but the Castellan won't let him. He's challenged Stannis to a duel, and Stannis is like, fuck that. So he just has the Shadow Assassin kill him as well, right?
Right, or that's what we're led to believe. So, now, if you actually go back, the events that occur during the first Shadow Assassin is Stannis falls asleep. He's with Melisandre, and he's with Devon, Davos' son. Stannis falls asleep. He cannot be woken up. Now, if you remember, there's another situation where people can't be woken up, like Bran, when he's warging, when he's skin changing, can't be woken up. So, like right there, there's kind of something with Stannis' consciousness. And so then an invisible creature comes in and actually kills Renly. So a lot of people say, oh, a shadow killed Renly. No, actually an invisible creature kills Renly. It casts a shadow, and that shadow has Stannis' face. But the invisible creature is the thing that actually kills him, not a shadow. Okay, and that's kind of a big deal, because it's not the thing there is actually an invisible embodiment of Stannis' consciousness. Like, Stannis is warging, and then an invisible embodiment of Stannis' consciousness, really his subconscious, kills Renly. Stannis has the memories of killing Renly. So, like, the consciousness returns to his body, and he has the memories of it, just like when Bran is warging Summer, his consciousness goes into Summer, and afterwards his consciousness returns, and he has all of those memories.
Wait a minute, what are you trying to say, that Stannis is a warg now?
I'm saying that Melisandre, as a shadow binder, is capable of taking Stannis' subconscious mind and pulling it out of his body, and his subconscious mind goes and kills Renly. Now, you may say, oh, this sounds so crazy. It turns out it's the exact same plot of George R. R. Martin's favorite movie, Forbidden Planet, where a guy falls asleep and his subconscious mind kills everyone. Like, it's the exact same plot. When I met George R. R. Martin, I brought up Forbidden Planet, and George R. R. Martin said, oh, that's my favorite movie. And I said to him, yeah, no, it really reminds me of when Stannis and Renly died, and the Shadow Assassin, and he like immediately turned away and started talking to somebody else. I was like, oh man. Like, I don't know if he just like turned away and started talking to somebody else because he was distracted, or if he was like, I don't want to be talking about that subject. But it was but it is the plot. It is the exact same plot of his favorite movie, is the subconscious mind killing somebody. Now, if you want to say, okay, well, maybe the subconscious mind of Stannis went into the Shadow Assassin or something, and it's similar, fine, I don't know. But now, with the second instance, Melisandre is not with Stannis, and as far as we know, Stannis is not asleep. Melisandre, comes underneath Storm's End, and then Davos sees a shadow come out of her vagina. Not an invisible creature, which is like, Kat sees an invisible, well, she doesn't see an invisible creature, but she sees, there's an invisible creature there. So he sees a shadow come out of her vagina. And then later, we don't know what kills Courtney Penrose, but Courtney Penrose is tossed off a balcony. Anyone could have tossed him off that balcony. Like, any of his men who should have been loyal to Stannis could have tossed him off. So, I mean, Melisandre has the ability to glamour. The second instance could have just been her glamoring, or her, releasing some sort of, smoke that gives Davos a hallucination or whatever. But, there doesn't need to be a shadow baby for the second instance. And the first instance seems more like warging than anything else. But that's my explanation of the shadow babies. And some people are like, oh, you're crazy. It's the much more realistic situation is that Melisandre had sex with Stannis, and their seed developed into a Mr. Meeseeks like demon that would just knowingly know to kill Renly on a one-time thing and then disappear from existence.
Yeah, why not?
Why
Magic.
not?
Magic.
Magic.
Magic. It's.
And that's how she could turn the tide of battle. Magic.
I don't think she could actually turn the tide of battle. I think she could use like glamour abilities to, make the combatants. Like to me, a lot of medieval battle is about morale. It's about strategy and morale. You can have like 50,000 men versus 10,000 men, and those 10,000 men would probably win that fight if those 50,000 guys weren't really into it because something spooked them.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a big thing about like spooking horses and breaking the van and causing people to panic. Like that's a big part of Ice and Fire.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Melisandre could have like created a glamour that caused everybody to get really scared and then turn the tide.
I see where your scientific your belief about Song of Ice and Fire being science fiction coming from, because maybe the Lord of Light guys are just people who has found advanced technology and can take advantage of it.
I mean, it's tough. Like, it's tough not to go the way, because when you start reading these stories where the characters are exactly the same and they're doing the same events, but it's sci-fi, then that's why my mind goes this way.
Well, your mind goes this way because you're so into George R. R. Martin, his story, that you read his other stories. A lot of people who do a Song of Ice and Fire content don't go to his other things. They just focus on this one thing. That's why people, trust your word on this thing. Even if some people always message me, please tell Preston to stop calling Ice and Fire science fiction. But here's the thing, though. I mean, a lot of artists and writers and authors take their previous work and put it into their most famous one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is if you haven't read his other work, you're approaching Ice and Fire from a Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings scope,
right.
Which is why you'll naturally say oh, it's all about magic. And I know a lot of people that are like, oh, which gods are real? Like, I really think R'hllor is a real god. And I'm like, I've read everything else by George R. R. Martin. He's a complete atheist. Like, I don't think he would ever have gods be in his stories.
And if he would have gods be in their story, it would be just to criticize them and show people that this is fucking stupid, this is goddamn ridiculous.
Right. They'd be like the most evil, well, I guess that would be the case if R'hllor was the only gods in the world are horrible. Yeah.
Well, you do make a good point about, Forbidden Planet being his favorite movie, because we've seen lots of authors. I mean, for example, the one I can really think of right now is, I'm going to sound like it's going to be so random, but I've been binge watching the hell out of One Piece recently. And One Piece is this manga about this kid who wants to be king of the pirates, blah, blah, blah. And he visits a lot of these islands. And a lot of these locations, the author is clearly a fan of Disney. He clearly is a fan. There's this one location he goes to called Thriller Bark. The main antagonist of that location has the ability to take your shadow and put it somewhere else. And he's basically making a bunch of zombies and, random monsters. And this is basically the author's version of Nightmare Before Christmas in his work. There's lots of stuff like that. Yeah. So they eventually go to an island where this woman has the ability to take your soul and throw it in inanimate objects like doors or trees or candy or stuff like that. And that's the author is clearly taking inspiration from Alice in Wonderland. So
yeah.
So we've seen this with stuff before, and it makes a lot of sense that George Martin's favorite, movie would come into his work. Okay, so what's your next question?
Well, this was the another thing. So was where the hell is Quaith? And obviously Quaith is such a big part of the books, and
I wouldn't say she's a big part, but she's a good part of Dany's story.
Well, Quaith is retroactively a big part of Dany's story. Yeah. Eventually, in the books, we eventually kind of figure out that the dreams that Dany's been receiving in the first book were at least some of them were sent by Quaith.
By the way, for those of you who don't know who Quaith is, she's the woman with a mask in season 2, I believe. Jorah goes to her to find out where the dragons are, and she's painting this naked guy painting this naked guy and telling Jorah where to find the dragons. That's who Quaith is. She's a big part in the books, but in the show, they kind of just sidelined her.
Yeah. So, I mean, her history in the books is essentially she was sending some dreams to Dany, then Dany runs into her in Qarth, and then she visits her. She might visit her some more in some dreams, we don't know, but she shows up in A Dance with Dragons. Through a glass candle, she visits Dany and gives her some more prophecies.
So much prophecies. She just can't. She just can't say. Honestly, like she just can't be straight and say this is what's gonna happen. Don't do this. Don't do that.
Well, I mean, I believe that that's by design. That when you're trying to screw with somebody mentally, and you're trying, you say everything in a riddle.
But why would she want to screw with Dany?
I don't necessarily think she's on Dany's side, or she wants to make Dany not trust anyone. I mean, if you say like don't trust anyone, like that's the thing is you say like the Valonqar, like the Valonqar could be so many people that it makes someone like Cersei not trust anyone.
Right.
So Quaith comes in and she says, don't trust, and then she gives this laundry list of like ambiguous things that could be anyone.
The Mummer's dragon. Who could that be?
The Mummer's dragon. Yeah, the Sun's son. Like that could be it could be anything. Like anything.
The Sun's son. The perfumed. What's it called?
The perfumed seneschal. Yeah. And so the lion and the griffin. Like there's a lot of lions and there's a lot of griffins and there's a lot of Sun's sons.
There can only be one son.
No. See, I get arguments about all this all the time. Everyone's like, no, that's Quentin Martell. I was like, nah. I mean,
really, who could be the son's son?
Oh, I mean, anybody. One argument is Drogo is her son in stars, right? So the son's son was Rhaego. So they were really talking about prophecies at the House of the Undying. So when she says like, oh, don't trust the son's son, don't trust that prophecy. Anybody, or son could be when she says son's son, it might not be the yellow ball son. It could be a son's son, as a grandson.
Doesn't she isn't it written down as son, S-U-N?
Right, but she's spoken to. Like we see it as written, but it's being spoken to Dany.
I don't know, man. That's a little. You're reaching there. You're reaching.
But then again, here's the other thing: is Dany thinks it's Quentin, and our protagonists are almost always wrong. So whatever Dany thinks, it's almost too easy, right? Son's son. So.
Once you get down George Martin's rules for how to his books, like the most tortured, sickly person always survives. They don't die. They always stay alive. Yeah. Like one of those rules. The protagonist is always wrong. There's at least one character in the entire books who's wrong the entire time, and one character who's right the entire time. When you crack down these rules, you can pretty much figure out what's gonna happen.
Yeah. I mean. Yeah, like if there's a list of possibilities like that they're thinking about in their head, like those possibilities are not going to happen, Like, oh, tomorrow I'm either going to have breakfast or I'm going to go to the tourney or, I'm going to put on a leather jerkin. No, none of those things are going to happen. You're going to have your arms cut off. It's always option 4. But son's son, I don't think it's Quentin Martell. Everybody else thinks it's Quentin Martell, but it's just too easy. It's too easy, and Dany gets it immediately. No way. Dany, all our protagonists are idiots. They never get it. She also thinks Reznak is the perfumed seneschal, and yet everyone's like, no, it can't be Reznak. No one believes that one. But son's son, everyone believes.
But where is Quaith, though? In the show, she's gone forever. She was just this random fortune teller who, just appeared, told Jorah where the dragons are, and then poof, she's gone. In the books, do you think she's in Asshai or still in Qarth?
I think she's still in Qarth. I personally think that Danny is going to head back to Qarth at some point.
But what's there, though?
And,
There's nothing there.
well, well, Quake is there.
Besides Quake, what else is there, though?
It has a unusual history, and so you might be able to unlock some secrets about the entire world there. So Qarth is surrounded by 3 walls, and the outermost wall is a stone wall, and then there's like I'm gonna gotta look up the material because I don't want to get the materials wrong.
Go ahead.
But it's it kind of seems like the outermost wall is the most primitive wall, and the innermost wall is the most advanced one. But how would you ever build walls to a city that way? You build walls to a city outward. So your latest wall should be the outermost wall, and yet Qarth's outermost wall is the most primitive wall. And so there's this interesting, So the walls are the 3 thick walls encircle Qarth. The outer wall is red sandstone, 30 feet high, with scenes of animals. The middle wall is 40 feet high, and it's granite, and it's got war. And the innermost wall is black marble and has carvings of people fucking. And so at first you think, okay, well that's Qarth's history, right? It's got nature on the outermost, most primitive wall. Then it's got war and battle on the middle wall, and then you reach Qarth's modernity, where they're just doing trade and luxury of black marble on the inner wall. And so you think that like it's progressing, that like from sandstone to granite to marble is the history of Qarth. But the problem is that like the marble wall should be the outermost wall, because you'd never build walls inward. You'd have to demolish parts of the city. It would just be completely impractical. And so if that's all flipped around, then it's like, well, that means Qarth's most modern, like Qarth's earliest period was when they had the marble, then they had the war and the granite, and then they descended down to like nature, and then they built their way back up to being a trader city. And so you know, everything is off with regards to the history. Like it's got this futuristic past, and then there was an interregnum, a disaster period, a Middle Ages, and then things kind of had a renaissance.
Wait a minute. This sounds familiar. Are you trying to say that Qarth was this sounds familiar. This sounds like your Game of Thrones is a sci-fi thing.
Yeah, it's definitely it's post. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
No, is it really?
But
what you're saying?
I think that, yeah, I think Qarth definitely had an apocalypse of some sort. I mean, it's in a red waste. I mean, and it has scenes of nature, so it wasn't always like a place of you know, horror and sand. I mean, they definitely used to have like greenery around there. Nothing about the place makes sense. Like the Qarthian are super pale, and yet it's the middle of the desert. They should be super dark. Like nothing makes sense about any of it. The same with Targaryens. Yeah, same with Targaryens. Like, why on earth would somebody that's super pale be like residing at the equator? Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, they were, you know, my guess is that they were subterranean at some point, and that's why they're super pale. But, you know, that's what I think. But the other reason I think they're going back to Qarth, I mean, I think she's going back to Qarth to talk to Quake. But one of the reasons I think she's going back is that in the World of Ice and Fire, the book, there's hardly anything on Qarth. Like,
and your whole theory behind that is that George R. R. Martin told the two writers to do whatever the hell they want in crafting whatever the hell they want about the world, except leave certain things off limits because I'm going to revisit these places.
Yeah, that's my theory, because there's nothing on Slaver's Bay and there's nothing on Qarth. And so if you're gonna, you know, because he wants to keep those open.
Right, because he wants to go back to them,
them.
and he wants to do his own thing before the story ends.
Right. You can write about Lorath all day long. Or you can write about E.T., whatever. But, Qarth, Slaver's Bay, that's going to be part of the story. So, I think Dany's going back to Qarth. I mean, once she's on her dragon, she can go wherever she wants. It's going to be fast trip.
I don't know, man. Hopefully we do see Quake again, but do we need to see Quake again? What is Quake gonna tell us that we don't already know? What's the possibility that a conversation between Quake and Dany personally could really give us? Because
again, about show or book
in the book, because in the book, if Dany goes back to Quake, what can Quake really give us? What information can she really dish out on us? Because there is a theory that Quake is somehow Dany Back to the Future or something like that, or I'm sure you heard of that one. That Quaithe is secretly a Targaryen, or that Quaithe is
Shira Seastar or Shara Dane or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. She could reveal her identity, and then as her identity, she would have a lot of history to tell. I mean, whether she's Shira Seastar or Shara Dane or Dany from the future or, anybody, she's going to have a lot of history to tell. So she's got that part to advance. She also has all of the things about, why were you sending me dreams? Were you part of hatching my dragon eggs? Were you part of making me resistant to fire? She would have all of those answers. She might be a big puppet master like Bloodraven. So, and I mean, there'd be a certain balance to it if it were if she were Shira Seastar, because you'd have, Bloodraven, Bittersteel, and Shira Seastar. That's a freaking tongue twister.
Shira
Bittersteel blood, by the seashore, yeah. But there would be a certain, balance to it if, the story were about Bloodraven up at the north of the wall, and then Bittersteel invading, and then in the east, Shira Seastar guiding Dany, and so you'd still have these three players messing with the world after all this time.
That would be for an interesting thing. I was reading this thing, just to be random, this manga called Claymore, which is basically about this, it takes place in this large island, and the island is plagued with these demons, and the organization sends out these women with these large claymores to fight these demons. One of the Claymore women theorizes that there's a larger continent out there who is at war with each other, and they're using this smaller island compared to them to unleash biological weapons so they can test them on the island's inhabitants so they can use it in war over there. And it's basically the story is centered on this one island, but many characters theorize that in this larger continent that's very far off, they don't know about, something else is big, and that they're all pawns just so one of the armies can get an upper hand in the other one. That's kind of like this here. All of Game of Thrones, some of the big players are just pawns towards, a much larger goal, a much larger fight between three different people. Bloodraven with Bran, Bittersteel with fake Aegon, and Quaithe with Dany.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe they're just the puppets of even, higher figures.
The puppets from the people of E.T.
Well, that's the thing, is we don't know, and George R. R. Martin's been pretty good about this. We don't know who the puppet masters are and who the puppets are, we don't, even with Bloodraven, you don't know if he's controlling the children or if the children are controlling him, what's going on in that relationship. So it's interesting. So,
speaking of Bloodraven, so Bran appeared in the most recent trailer.
He did. He
did not appear in the first trailer, did he? Him and Sam.
No. Right. He did. And the question is sort of, what is he going to be doing? They show him briefly skin changing some ravens. So I suppose he can skin change some ravens and then try to peck out some White Walker eyes or something and help Jon for a moment.
Peck out White Walker eyes.
Right, but it seems like he, he's got to go back. It seems like you got to go back to the time traveling plot, right? I mean, you can't just do time traveling once and then never go back to it again. This isn't Harry Potter.
Well, well, I will say this: I don't think we're gonna get any more time traveling
You don't think so?
because when we talk about Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling's understood that when you introduce time traveling into your books, it can be a very messy, annoying situation, which is why they never do time traveling ever again until the play.
Yeah.
Until the play. For those of you who don't know, I'm not gonna spoil the play for you, but it was a very meh play because they do reintroduce time travel and it's a fuckstorm. But when you introduce time traveling into your story, like a lot of things get fucked up. A lot of questions are like. So is time a loop now? Like, has everything happened before? Because Hodor, like, did he somehow manage to break into time and change the events as time is continuing? Like, it's just a whole fucking thing, right? So I don't think they're gonna reintroduce time again. And the reason I don't think they are is because you have the Children of the Forest, and Bran is in this cave. Maybe this cave is a sacred place with a lot of magic, and all this magic amplifies his power to be able to go back in time. Now that the cave has been compromised and Bran can't be there again, I don't think we're going to have time travel because Bran, even though he can tap into these abilities, they're not amplified when he's back at Winterfell.
So George R. R. Martin has 3 time travel stories that he's written, and one of them isn't even one. Some people would argue with me if it's time travel or not, but in these stories, George R. R. Martin is very, very aware of paradoxes, and he really tries to avoid the paradoxes, and his secret for getting around it is consciousness. That somehow you can, if you send your consciousness back, it's not a physical thing, and therefore it's not interfering with things, object wise. You know how in Time Cop, if you go back in time and you touch yourself, the world explodes, or
wait, what?
you
really?
annihilate
I've never
yourself.
seen Time
Oh
Cop.
God, it's horrible. But yeah, if you happen to touch yourself because of the paradox, you like annihilate yourself. It's ridiculous. But now, of course, it still doesn't make sense. I'm not saying it makes sense at all, but his attempt to get around it is consciousness time travel. Is his way of like trying to get around the paradoxes.
But isn't that what Bran did? Bran basically, well, originally what he was doing with the Tower of Joy scene and watching the kids spar, he sent his consciousness back. Like, he's there, he can't touch anything,
right?
And he's walking, so it's clearly in his mind. He's there in his mind. But how come the whole Hodor thing? How come Hodor was able to see him or even hear him?
So I would say that, like, some people look at it and they go, oh, well, it's a time loop, and therefore it's all closed and fine, and we don't have to think about it. But you can't just have a time loop. Something has to initiate the time loop. Like, I understand, like, the original Terminator is a neat little time loop, and then we don't have to think about it. But something has to initiate the time loop in the first place. So so a time loop is a paradox. Like, one just shouldn't exist for the sake of existing. So it sounds like there wasn't it sounds like we're viewing timeline 2, and that there was another story previously that caused Hodor to become Hodor, and then Bran had to do it again in order to keep certain things in the timeline consistent. And then maybe he's gonna like try to do something to the timeline again at the end of the story. But I mean, I don't like the idea of time loops. I don't think George R. R. Martin didn't do it in his other stories. Like, he had people send consciousness back to actually change time, and he did, and time was changed, and not in a loopy, self-fulfilling way.
Would you say that Butterfly Effect movie with Ashton Kutcher?
Yeah.
Would you say that's the best way to do time travel? Every time you go back, shit does change in the future?
Yeah. Yeah. So, maybe I should explain like some of the stories. So George R. R. Martin has a story called Under Siege. And it's the first story that Tyrion appears in. So Tyrion Well, it's not Tyrion, but it's Tyrion. So the story takes place in the future, a post-apocalyptic future, and it everybody's underground, and they've invented a time machine, and then there's certain people that they can send back in time, and one of these people is a clever, drunk, chess-playing dwarf, and he's the time traveler.
Of course.
This yes. So they keep sending him back to this period of time between Finland and Russia when they had tensions leading up to, I think, World War II. And, there's this one specific moment in history that he's trying to change in order to completely change the timeline and like stop the world from ending. And so he Hodors this guy in the past. So he goes back in time and he Hodors this guy, and he takes over his body and he tries to like get him to change things. And the guy that's getting Hodored is flipping out because he thinks he's going insane. He's like, why am I doing things that are traitorous to my people? Why am I doing these random things? I hear voices in my head. I'm going nuts. Meanwhile, in the future, Tyrion is getting scared because he doesn't want to get blinked out of existence. And he keeps saying to people, like, when I change the timeline, won't we all cease to exist? And they're like, yeah, you'll cease to exist, but a better world will be here instead because this world sucks. And Tyrion is like, okay, I don't know. Anyway, Tyrion is flirting with this girl. We'll call her Shay. And he's flirting with this girl, and then Shay ends up like banging this other guy, and so Tyrion becomes pretty suicidal. So he goes back in time, and he's Hodored the guy, and then all of a sudden there's this moment where the two consciousnesses decide to blend together. Like the guy who's really scared of Tyrion Hodoring his body is like, no, maybe it'll be cool. Maybe this will be like a friendship. Our consciousnesses will merge. And so the consciousnesses merge and the war is prevented. And at the end, like this character is like this, the guy in the past is like this chess playing successful dude who lives a happy life. And the consciousness from the future got to exist and stay in the past, like second lifed.
But the shit still happens.
No, he changes time. And I guess he blinks everybody out of existence. Shay, her lover, his old body. It's all blinked out of existence because he stopped the apocalypse. Yeah.
What book is this again?
It's called Under Siege. It's got the same name as the fucking goddamn executive decision. What's the action star's name?
Oh, Steven Seagal?
Steven Seagal, yeah. It's got the same name as Steven Seagal's. Yeah, Under Siege.
So, Preston, I have some voicemails that were sent in to us. By the way, guys, if you want to send your voicemails in, you want to have your voice heard on the podcast, please send it to me on facebook.com/redteamreview. But, Preston, would you like to take some voicemails?
Of course, of course.
I forgot who sent this in. I do apologize, but this is one of the voicemails we have.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Big love from Australia. I was just wondering, what are your guys' thoughts on who the hooded man in Winterfell is? Because it's got to be someone important, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't keep his face hidden. So, yeah, what do you think?
So, his question is about the hooded man. Now, this is from the books. Unfortunately, it was not in the show, but it's a cute little... It's an interesting mystery we have. So, basically, for those people who haven't read the books, when Theon is in Winterfell, after the Boltons have taken it over, he encounters this random person who... Doesn't he know who the person is? We never find out who it is, but doesn't he recognize them? Or they recognize him?
Well, Theon doesn't really recognize him, but Theon has a real problem with recognizing anybody. He doesn't mention who it is, certainly. Mm-hmm. But Theon's mind is all screwed up at this point. Like, he doesn't recognize his own sister and hits on her, so there's a lot of weird things about Theon's recognition. And then it all of a sudden coming back to him later and him being able to recognize people after a decade. Like he can recognize Stannis' voice, even though he hasn't seen Stannis in 10 years.
But the hooded man, yeah, like is this just a random person that we encounter in the books once and then just goes away?
That's right. It's very short. It's a very short paragraph. Theon is walking through the snow, and the hooded man sees him. The hooded man recognizes Theon. Theon doesn't mention who his identity, but they seem to know each other. He pulls out a knife. Theon says that pulls off his glove and shows him his wounded hand, and then the hooded man kind of chuckles and moves on. It's a very odd little conversation.
So when I first read this, I thought it was Theon because it was so short. What was the point in it? I thought it was just Theon hallucinating. His guilt coming back.
Theon Durden theory.
What's it called?
Theon Durden theory is what people call it.
Oh, because Tyler Durden Fight Club, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but who could a hooded man be? Like I know you have some ideas. For me, it's either Theon's mind playing tricks on him or one of Robb's old allies. Take your pick of which one.
Well, there's some things to think about. It has to be an ally that, if he did come from outside, it has to be an ally that the Boltons at the gate would let in, either to treat or because they thought he was an ally. He might have snuck in, though, so we're not sure. But there is that issue of whether or not he's somebody that the Boltons would think is a potential ally and would let into the castle, thinking that there was no problem. So some people say something like, oh, maybe it's Howland Reed. And I don't know if the Boltons would accept in Howland Reed or why Howland Reed would be traveling alone. It would be an odd situation. I also don't know if Howland Reed knows Theon and if Theon knows Howland Reed. Theon traveled with Ned all over the north, as his kind of his ward, his assistant, and so Theon knows a lot of the lords and a lot of the castles.
Right.
But we don't know if he ever went to Greywater Watch. So maybe it's certainly possible.
I would like it if it would be Howland Reed, because that would mean that Howland Reed. I mean, would Howland Reed know how to sneak into Winterfell? Yeah, right.
I mean, who knows? I don't think so, but. I mean, keep in mind, only Theon knows how to sneak into Winterfell. And Bran. I mean, Bran knows the castle inside and out. I don't know who else would know the ins and outs of Winterfell besides Theon and Bran.
But who else could it be, though?
Well, the theory that I go with is Robert Glover. Robert Glover was for some reason in White Harbor with Manderley, and he sent off Davos to find Rickon, and so people might say, oh, it's Robert Glover. He's maybe an ally. We aren't sure because he was captured for much of the war, and his wife, had to give forces to Stannis, but it wasn't, she didn't have much choice. So Robert Glover could potentially show up at the gates and say, oh, I'm neutral. I'm actually here to show homage to the Boltons, or I'm here to treat because I have some really important information. And so some people think it's Robert Glover announcing or telling people inside Winterfell that Davos was successful and that he has Bran after all. I mean, not Bran, Rickon after all. Because, I mean, if Manderley is let in, and they think Manderley is an ally, why wouldn't they let in Robert Glover?
Right. Could it also be Hallis Malin, the captain of the guard, who was also charged with Ned's bones?
I mean, that's an interesting idea. Back in A Clash of Kings, Catelyn sends Ned's bones north with Hallis Malin, the captain of the guards, and he vanishes. And Lady Dustin says he hasn't come out of the neck, and that she has people watching the neck to stop him because she purposely doesn't want Ned's bones returned to Winterfell. So I'm kind of against the idea that it's Hallis Malin because the Dustins should have stopped him. Unless Lady Dustin's full of it and she really would side with him. But also the people at the gates, if Hallis Malin showed up, I don't understand why they would let him in. They would say, whoa, some old Stark supporter? Like, what are you doing here? And so I do wonder, yeah, it'd be nice if Hallis Malin would come back into the story, but I don't see what he could do. I mean, even if Hallis Malin, let's say it was Hallis Malin, like, okay, who cares? Like, he shows up and he says, okay, I've got Ned's bones, and everyone goes, yeah, who gives a fuck? I mean, Lady Dustin would go, no, but everyone else would be like, yeah, we don't care. Like, we're in the middle of a war here. Like, how is that relevant at all?
Well, maybe he is working with Lady Dustin. Like, maybe Lady Dustin doesn't really trust Theon, so she's telling Theon, things that you would tell someone who you believe is a Bolton supporter or a Bolton ally. And maybe she really is working with him, and she bribed the guards to let specifically that guy through.
Sure, but Hallis Malin doesn't change anything. Like, what's nice about the Howland Reed theory, or someone that was with Howland Reed in the neck, is they might have Robb's will, and Robb's will could affect the events. And then if it's Robert Glover, him arriving with news of Rickon could really affect the events.
Right.
And so both of these characters, not only is it, would they be people that would recognize Theon, and they might be people that the Bolton guards would let by. They're also people that would shake things up. Like their arrival would affect the story and would be important to the story.
But Hallis Malin, meh.
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that it's something that people have been thinking about, and Catelyn thinks about it in A Storm of Swords, and Lady Dustin brings it up in A Dance with Dragons. Like, other than this plot point getting closed, this random plot point getting closed, he doesn't really affect the story. Like,
what's the thing I told you about why it's Hallis Malin? Oh, I told you like 10 minutes ago. What was it?
His initials are the same?
Yeah, the initials are the same. I saw that on a Facebook post. Someone puts hooded man, Hallis Malin. Coincidence? I don't know. It's right under our nose the entire time. Clever boy, now, George.
There's also the fun question of where is Hallis Malin now?
Oh boy.
If he didn't make it north, like where, is he hanging out with Howland Reed, chilling at Greywater Watch with some bones and Robb's will? Like, we don't know.
Maybe Howland, because you said last time we saw him, last time we hear of him, he's in the neck. Maybe he does catch up with Howland Reed. Howland stops him because the Greyjoys have taken Moat Cailin.
Yeah. I mean, he can't continue on because the Greyjoys are there. Mm-hmm. So, the really fun idea that probably isn't true, but it's really fun, is that Hallis Malin was captured by the Ironborn, and then he was brought back to the Iron Islands, and Ned's bones are aboard Victarion's ship, and they've been brought all the way out to Slaver's Bay.
Jesus fucking Christ. How do you figure that?
They took his bones and they popped it on his ship, thinking that they might be useful one day in some sort of negotiation, and he never unpacked the ship, and somehow Ned's bones ended up in Slaver's Bay. That's the more fun. That's the more fun one.
That's so fucking kind of random, though.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like the fun aspect of Gilly being in Slaver's Bay, Do you know about this?
No, I do not know about this. Everything Gilly I try to avoid, but go ahead.
So Gilly, the last we see Gilly, Sam left her on the Cinnamon Wind. That's the Summer Islander ship. Mm-hmm. And said, hey, can Gilly stay here? And the captain, Kahuro Mo, is just like, okay, sure. Well, sure, she can stay here, but come back soon. And he's like, okay, I'll be back. And then Sam goes to the Citadel, and he has his little adventure, and he talks to Marwyn, and Marwyn literally says, I'm going to go to Slaver's Bay with the Cinnamon Wind. And Sam's not really thinking, and he kind of blacks out by looking into the glass candle. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, Marwyn's gone. Now, you don't know if Marwyn went down to the docks and they kicked Gilly off the boat, or if Marwyn got right on the boat and
I don't remember
sailed
this.
off with Gilly. Yeah.
They took Gilly to Slaver's Bay?
Well, we don't know. We know that Marwyn said he was going to take the same ship, and Gilly was on the ship the last time we saw her. And so it would be really fun if her and the babe were taken to Slaver's Bay. The other fun aspect of this is Jeor Mormont's last words were, tell my son to take the black. And Gilly was sitting right there. And so she could actually deliver that message to
Jorah Mormont. But how would she know it was Jorah? I mean, come on.
I mean, and it would be an incredible memory. Like, like I've met all of these random dudes. Like my whole life, I've known like 30 people, and they were all my relatives. And in the past, year, I have met, hundreds of dudes. Am I really gonna remember the name Jorah Mormont? and this, who knows? But it's a fun little idea that like Gilly is in Slaver's Bay and she's going to meet Jorah Mormont and she's going to tell him like you're supposed to take the black.
So who do we have at Slaver's Bay? We have Victarion, Ned's Bones, Gilly. Anybody else?
Gilly, baby Aemon.
Anybody else?
Who could accidentally be there?
Yeah. Gendry, maybe.
People used to think that maybe Euron was out there, but Euron's definitely not. Euron is definitely now
the whole
because of
the whole Euron is Dario thing.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I mean, but now that we know that the Battle of Blood is happening and he's out, he's with Aeron, so he's definitely not there. I'm trying to think of anybody else cool. I mean, besides Marwyn, Gilly, baby Aemon. Ned's Bones, Hallis Mullen.
Everybody's all the random characters. You don't really know why. They're just all even dead characters are all converging on Dany for the finale.
Oh shit! You know who might be there too? Fucking Viserys' bones, Viserys' body. Obviously, Aemon's dead body. Old Aemon's dead body is going to be there because it's
still in the Cinnamon Wind.
Yeah, it was still in the Cinnamon Wind. Yeah, and all of his books including the fucking book on dragons. By the way, it's so fun to track this one dragon book. So, oh shit, now I'm on a tangent. Do you remember way back at the beginning of A Game of Thrones, Tyrion is reading a book about dragons in the Winterfell library. He takes a bunch of books with him to the wall, and he asks Ned's permission, and Ned says it's okay. While he's on his way to the wall, while he goes to the wall, remember the Winterfell library is burned down
because of the cat's paw.
Because of the cat's paw. So Tyrion ends up saving some books. Now, we don't really know what happens to Tyrion's books after this, because Tyrion doesn't really mention bringing them back to the library, but based on the description of what Tyrion's reading, it seems like Sam comes across the book later and ends up bringing the book with him on his voyage south. And then he brings the book all the way down to Old Town, where it's supposed to be sold, where it's supposed to be brought to the Citadel, but he accidentally had sold it back to, Kahuro Mo. And so Kahuro Mo says he's going to sell it to the Citadel, but Marwyn jumps on the boat real quick, and they likely have brought that book all the way to Slaver's Bay. So
what the fuck?
I know it's an incredibly crazy thing. But it's funny.
This is why I love you, because you're the one paying attention to this stuff. You notice that these people are reading books about dragons and shit like this, but you don't really. It doesn't really connect the dots until someone like you, who's really paying attention, starts connecting the dots. So basically the book is doing that one thing that you did in one of your recent videos where, like, the dagger gets made.
Right, and then it gets followed. So yeah, Tyrion read a dragon book. He brought it to the wall. Sam later finds this dragon book. It seems like the same one. Brings it down to Old Town. It may have gotten dropped off, or it may have been brought all the way to Slaver's Bay. So there might be this dragon book. There might be Aemon's body. There might be baby Aemon. There might be Gilly.
What kind of irresponsible asshole gets on the boat and doesn't clear it of dead bodies, women, and children?
I know. Because Kahuro Mo actually said it would take him several days to unload his ship. So if Marwyn went and took off immediately, it means he didn't unload his ship.
So we have the body of Aemon, Ned's bones, the baby and Gilly, and these random books all heading towards fucking Dany. Everybody's converging on Dany.
Well, so there's also another question of what happened to Viserys' body. So it's never discussed after.
Wouldn't the Dothraki just leave it there, or like bury him in a shallow grave? Because Dany doesn't give a fuck.
I don't know. It's covered with gold. You wouldn't You've got a gold covered skull. Like you wouldn't throw that away. But before Tyrion jumps on his ship, the Widow of the Waterfront does tell him, "You're going on a boat, and one of the things on the boat is actually a dead body that's been pickled." And we have no idea whose dead body is pickled and would be heading, to Slaver's Bay. But some people are like, well, maybe it's Viserys' body? What happened to Viserys' body? No one knows what happened to Viserys' body. It might be sitting in Fastoth Rock, covered in gold. But,
Jesus fucking
so
Christ.
So many things.
That's why you want a Sam chapter so badly, because
oh my god,
you want there to be a moment where Sam's like, hey, wait a minute, where's Gilly? What the fuck happened?
Where's Gilly?
I steal this woman from the north to bring her all the way here just to forget where the fuck is Gilly? Where is she?
It'd just be awesome. It would be the worst feeling in the world as well. Like you've been on a ship for months and you think you've arrived. And it's like, sorry, no, you're going to be on a ship again for months. Oh, God. Poor Gilly.
It's so douchey, but I love the fact that Gilly's going to be in the middle of an Ironborn, a Marinese harpy fight with like dragons all around her, like in the middle of a siege, no less, and she's just gonna be arriving maybe just in time for that fucking battle to still continue.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh. But the chances of Hallis Mullen and Ned's bones being there, I don't know, but it would be a fun one.
Well, that's it for now. We'll close it up here. Guys, thank you so much for listening to Aftershow Episode 3. Sorry it took so long to get out, but, Preston and I have things to do. He has to visit Narnia, and I have to... Sometimes I can't record because noisy as hell over here. But we are available on SoundCloud and iTunes, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon for some exclusive discussions between Preston and I, as well as early access to the next episode 3 to 5 days before it's out anywhere else. But once again, guys, thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Preston, do you have anything?
Nope, that's good. I'll see you guys later.
Also, be sure to follow Preston on Twitter at SweetRobin9000 and his Facebook, because, by the way, I fucking wanted to discuss this real quickly, but I forgot, oh my god, how, the topic of you is fucking taboo and forbidden on certain Facebook groups and forums. Well, can we discuss? Do you mind if we discuss that? Cause I know it's like, I know it's one of those things where you don't want to really get into. But do you mind if we discuss that next episode, or?
Sure, we can discuss it.
Yeah, because for those of you who don't know, like a lot of people hate Preston outside of YouTube for no fucking reason whatsoever, and I really wanted to go into how ridiculous that is. You know it is. It's fucking stupid. Yeah. Also, we are most likely not going to do an after show when Season 7 hits. So we'll do Episode 4, then 5, then 6 right away, but we won't do, like, an after show. But we'll try to dish out as many podcast episodes as possible during Season 7. Also, guys, I know this episode is one of the shortest ones we've done. I am sorry about that. Originally, I wanted to go through a lot more of your questions and voicemails, but we run out of time. Preston has to go to work, and so do I, and at times it's a bit difficult to record due to our, different time zones. But I promise you, we'll go through as many as we can. Do not stop sending in your voicemails. Keep sending them to me at facebook.com/redteamreview. I want to save as many as I can for future episodes. But once again, thanks so much for listening and for your patience, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.